Okay, so we're all pretty much back now. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, another lightning talk. We have 3 in this round. And first up, we have Professor Paula Carroll, who researches and teaches operational research and business analytics in the UCD School of Business, focusing on problems that arise in the clean energy transition. And speaking of women in the loop, Paula was the first woman to be promoted to professor in the 46-year history of the Management Information Systems subject area in UCD. Round of applause for that, Paula. And she's going to talk to you today about gender dimensions and the clean energy transition. So please welcome Professor Paula Carroll.
Thank you very much. So I guess we are here. Excellent. We can use that as well. Okay. Lots of tech bits. Yeah. So I would talk for all afternoon. So flag me when I'm at my 12 minutes. Yeah. Okay. And I have to say thank you to the organisers for the invitation, and thank you to the panellists for the really interesting panel discussion. There were so many topics and things picked up there that need further thought and further discussion. But I'm going to restrict myself today to talking about this topic. So my background is electrical engineering. I have fallen out of that pipeline, and I now work in operations research and business analytics in a business school. That's what I do. And I use mathematical and quantitative techniques to model and solve problems that arrive in the clean energy transition. That's what I do. So one of the things we became interested in is what are the problems in the clean energy transition and where do they come from? And they come from policies. So Ireland is an EU member state. The EU makes directives and they get passed down to member states to implement in their own legislation. So governments have to comply with these directives from the EU. So governments make their own policy decisions, and then somebody somewhere has to implement all of those things. So it occurred to us to start thinking about the language that's used in these policy documents. How does that actually impact what happens on the ground? And we thought we'd just look at one strand, because in each piece of research you just look at one small thing, and then all the small things add up together. So let's see, can we go this way? So that's what I do, operations research and business analytics. So designing algorithms and tools to support decision-making, problem structuring methodologies, frameworks to best utilize scarce resources, extracting insights from data, and mainly real-world applications. That's what I'm really interested in. So that's the kind of thing that I do. And somebody mentioned the SDGs earlier on today. So they do give us a good framework for the things that we in the world need to be doing, but they're connected. You can't solve one at the cost of another. So I was looking at SDG 5. And you've probably seen this before. So we've recently had the wonderful trip to the back of the moon, but the very first all-female spacewalk was scrapped. And have you seen that before? Do you know why it was scrapped? They didn't have spacesuits to fit the women. So if NASA can overlook having the right size spacesuits for the women, all of us can be blind. We can overlook having the right tools to help the people do their jobs. So that just struck a chord with me. And I think a lot of things, when you start looking for them, strike a chord with you. When you're not looking for them, you're kind of not aware of them. And we are all biased. We are all slightly blind. So a little bit of background. I'm going to try and skim through these very quickly. The EU, as I said, Ireland is an EU member state. It has a gender division. It has gender policies. It has gender strategies. These are a couple of statistics. I work in academia now. I formerly worked in industry. But a little under half of the staff in faculty are women. But if you look at the right-hand side, you can see there's that inverted pyramid. So more of them are at the entry level, and not so many of them making it up to the top positions. Although in Ireland, we have gone from having no female presidents of universities to almost all of the universities in Ireland having female presidents, which is good. It may flip. So every time you get progress, you get a pushback. So back and forth, back and forth. We just keep pushing forward step by step as best we can. As I said, I work in the clean energy transition. There's a little piece here about, or there should be a little piece here, maybe it's not coming up, about a profile of the energy sector. So a small number of women make up the staff of the energy sector. In the traditional sector, it's only about, I think, 20%. I've lost my statistics. But only about 5% of the CEOs of those big companies are women. So women aren't on the boards. To get them on the boards, they have to have come through the pipeline. To stay in the pipeline, you have to not fall out of the pipeline. So there's a whole load of things that the panelists earlier raised. So I was putting these two together. So SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. You can't just do one on its own. We can't have one at the detriment of the other. So when we get this clean energy transition, we have to make sure it doesn't make energy poverty worse. Because when we look at the statistics, we see that there are more women in energy poverty. In general, there are more women in poverty because of their careers, their pensions. We had some insurance and financial people earlier. There are a lot of things going on. So we were looking at, can we use these techniques of operations research, that's OR, and business analytics to help in the clean energy transition? And in particular, I started looking at the language. Now, I know I'm in front of an audience of data scientists, and I'm not a data scientist. I am a lapsed electrical engineer who does operations research. So some of you have very, very deep skills in natural language processing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a paper that we produced about 3 or 4 years ago, which was just before the explosion of all the LLMs. So just using basic techniques, you can do a lot of really interesting things, but you do have to know what you're doing and what questions you're asking. So I was asking, is the language important? And I think we'll agree the words we use are very important. I was wondering, is the language in these energy policy documents, is it gender biased? So this is a quick little exercise, and those of you in NLP, natural language processing, will have seen all of these ideas before. If I say the word nurse, I should have asked you all to close your eyes. And if I say nurse, what do you see? And if I say engineer, what do you see? And these are kind of the societal stereotypes that are encoded in our lives, in our brains. We are all biased. So what I'm showing here is a little diagram of things called principal components. So I'm in an educated audience here. Most people probably know what they are. But when I take data and map it through some kind of an encoding system, I can then represent it on a diagram like this. And what that's trying to show you is that the word nurse is closer to woman than it is to man, and engineer is closer to man than it is to woman. So we can quantify the distance between words to try and get an interpretation of the meaning. So I was going to use those techniques to try and figure out what if we look at the language of the climate action plans that all EU member states have to create. So is the language in those policy documents biased? And after we had done that work, I don't know if you remember, we had a referendum here and we looked at the Constitution and we used our tools then to look at the Constitution. And you can see a quick summary there, just even basic things. How often does the Irish Constitution say he, him, his, compared to she, whatever I said, the female version? So it's much more leaning. It is an old document, so you might say that's the way society was, that's what we expect. But what if we start looking at the national climate action plans? So those are documents that evolve, so they have to be updated over time. Down the bottom there, you can see the publication. It took a while to get it through the publication process. I don't know if you're familiar with the peer-reviewed process, but you have to submit your paper. You get reviewers who are independent, who look at your paper. And it took quite a while for the editor to find reviewers who were willing to couple together women, gender and energy. In the same way as, it should be obvious in the health sector, women and men physically are different. We need sex disaggregated data. But what about in the energy sector? They were a bit confused about why do you want to look at gender with relation to energy? What's that about? And we're still trying to figure it out. So our methodology, kind of a standard pipeline. So what we did was we took all the English language versions of the climate action plans of the member states. We did a whole load of processing, so tidying them up, taking out stop words, taking out different grammar signals and so on. So you can see in the pre-processing, so that pipeline just took us a little bit of time. As I said, this was all before LLMs had crashed onto the scene. So we were going through step by step in this kind of formal methodology. So tidying everything up. And then we used a technique called word embedding. So again, people in natural language processing are familiar with how you can map words to a quantitative value. So those tools are available. There are Python libraries that do that for you. So they're trained already on things like Google News. And what they're trying to figure out is how often is the word nurse associated with woman? How often is the word engineer associated with man, and so on. So there are libraries of tools that have done all of that work, and we were able to leverage those. We didn't have to write our own tools. So what we did was exploratory data analysis. So having taken all the English language version, we did frequency counts of the words. What are the words in these energy documents? And we did something quite novel. We made an energy domain vocabulary. So we said, what are the words that are used in these energy documents? And then we went through a gender bias analysis of those word sets. We said, the words that are used in energy policy, how associated are they with male or female type words? So we were able to quantify the distance between things. So we have some formulae there for how we did it. So there was some technical stuff going on in the background. We created these measures for each of the documents. We created that vocabulary, and then we used some statistical testing to quantify how gender biased each of the member state climate action plans are. So this is part of the exploratory data analysis. So you can see a word cloud of the types of words that appear in energy policy documents. And they're all quite innocuous. So renewable energy, climate, investment. But when you start going through the words as well, some of them are more strongly associated with kind of maleness than femaleness. And what we really were interested in is, just as a starting point, quantifying the gender bias. So a method to do that. So our results and our analysis. So we did all of the analysis of all of the member states, and then we made that vocabulary. This is just the 14 most common words that appeared across all of the energy policy documents. So the energy policy documents are there in green. You can't really read them, but they say things like electricity and investment and renewable and so on. And then the words that we're using as our gender vocabulary are things like grandfather, brother, and so on, mother, the equivalent. So we've got the male words in blue, the female words in red, and the energy words in green. And then we were quantifying overall how close are the male words to the green words, and likewise the female words to the green energy words. So that gave us a measurement that we could use and a statistical test we could perform to see, are these documents gender biased? So we can conclude, having quantified all of that and our methodology is robust, that indeed all of the energy policy documents turn out to be gender biased. Not massively. Anything with a negative number is gender biased. So the more negative it is, the more gender biased it is. These are the 14 common words. So each of those have their own gender bias. You might say, why does sector have a gender bias? But it's by association. That's what the NLP tells us. And when we look at the different governments and different states, the one that was the most biased was the Portuguese National Energy and Climate Action Plan. As I said, we looked at the English language versions. Some other English doesn't have gender of the nouns, but other languages do. So Portuguese, French, Spanish, all of the words, the nouns, I should say, have a gender. And that adds another layer of complexity that we didn't even look at. So I've probably gone way over my time. So many interesting things to talk about and tell you about. This is just the listing in rank order. The Portuguese was the most gender biased and the Slovenian was the least gender biased, but they were all gender biased in terms of the methodology and the vocabularies that we used. I want to finish with some final words. And I'm going to ask you just to think, if I put the word imposter, what pops into your head? And I'll give you the Merriam-Webster definition of what an imposter is. So one that assumes a false identity for the purpose of deception. That's what the dictionary says it is. If I give you another one, syndrome. So we had some talk earlier about healthcare and medical issues and so on. Syndrome, a set of signs and symptoms. Sometimes after the medical people have gone through enough of them, they say it's actually a disease. We put that together and what do we get? Imposter syndrome. And it's a thing that people talk about all the time, and I'm not sure they're the right words at all. To me, what it is really about, and it came up in the panel discussion earlier, is about belonging. It's not, I don't think, that women have an illness. So we were talking earlier about problematizing. This is what the definition from the dictionary says imposter syndrome is, that it is a psychological condition. And I don't really think we all have these illnesses. I think, what we really need to understand is that the women are not broken. The women don't need to be fixed. The systems have broken parts and the systems need to be fixed. So that is me. These are my co-authors. I just wanted to acknowledge them as well. And I think that's the end of my slides. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula. Your slide had my favorite acronym of the day, WISDOM, Women in Society Doing Organizational Management Science. Was that correct?
Sorry, I had to squeeze that one in as well. Yes, so I founded and I co-chair with my colleague, Nuncia is here as well, Access Secretary, wherever Nuncia is, she's down the back, an organisation called Women in Society Doing Operations Research and Management Science. They're the techniques I use. I picked the word wisdom and I squished all the other things.
Yeah, it works.
It's a European level organisation to support women in operations research, and we are now just launching a global organisation as well. So we'll be announcing that at a big conference in the summer. So anybody that's interested, you can look up WISDOM and you can find out more about it.
Excellent. I'm glad I asked you about that now.